Hello, everybody. New Manchester here. Um, yeah, I did a video about Winston Wu's Happier Abroad site, talking about how America is, how toxic and unfriendly and messed up the United States really is. And well, there's a country that's north of us that it's just as bad. I mean, and I have a post from Will in Dorn, and was posted back on December the 17th of 2012, and it's pretty old, and it's titled "Why Living in Canada Sucks." So I'm gonna go ahead and read this. Canada, the second biggest country on Earth, is a pretty strange place if you think really about it. It would take most people a while to figure out why. So I'll make it easy and tell you in my option why, backed up by facts. I've lived in various places in Canada for about 30 of my 40 years. Although I was born in the capital of Canada to Canadian parents, my mindset and upbringing does not fit the mold of your standard blue collar Canadian white guy. So I don't fit in here. My father is Canadian born, but is the opposite of most people here, and worked most of his life abroad due to his job. He is very educated, but not used to dealing with the average Canadians like I am, so has a different view of things. Given his job, he was used to dealing with the elite of Canada and foreign countries. My mom is German born, and that had a huge influence on my life. When my parents first hired Filipina maids 33 years ago, I connected with the culture there immediately and fell in love with it after my first visit here. You have to wonder why such an absolutely huge place, second only to Russia in size, only has about 35 million people living there, most of them near the US border. Yes, you guessed it. For half of the year, Canada is a vast frozen wasteland of snow and ice from east to west and north to south. Most Canadians take this for granted and grin and bear it. So most locals here are some pretty tough and heartly people. If you don't like extreme if you don't like extreme cold, however, you will hate it here from about October to April. Spring and fall are cool, but summer is usually very hot and humid. The most mild climates are Victoria and Vancouver, where I lived, and they are the only places I am prepared to live in Canada. The problem is I no longer want to live in Vancouver, so that means the only solution is to leave Canada. I think that if Canada were the same size, but in at a lower altitude, the population would be like the USA. Most Canadians brag about how big the country is and how it is bigger than the USA. This is true, but I would much rather have the USA as a territory to live in. It is only a bit smaller and has mild climates all year round in southern areas. Canada is like one big Alaska, and most of it is unlivable. Just look at the northern territories of Canada. The area is huge and only 100,000 people live here. So the hostile weather has a huge reason on the small population here. Just look at other countries with Canada's size, like China, USA, and Brazil. They have huge populations. Canada's massive size works against it because it makes traveling aerial time consuming affair. It even has 6 time zones, so going somewhere usually involves a long time and a lot of money. So traveling or doing business here is a real headache because you have a small population spread across a huge area in a very hostile climate. Canada's leader is a woman and lives in another country. Queen Elizabeth II in the UK. Most Canadians themselves are not aware the supreme leader of Canada is the Queen of England. Due to this, Canada is a well-established monarchy from the very top down, just like most of the Commonwealth and Anglosphere. About 95% of Canadian men are manginas and don't realize it. Yeah, interesting. They think that calling their wives the boss and having her in charge is totally normal. That's not normal. In fact, in Canada, women and men's roles are reversed from the natural system. Women are in charge and look and act masculine like men do in male power societies, and the men act submissive like foreign women do in male power societies. That is messed up. Most men here have never known anything else and assume this is the way it is everywhere. If they stood up to their wives, she would divorce him and he would have to give up half of what he owns and pay alimony just like in the USA. That's not right. So marriage here is fraud. Most men don't realize it because they are so desperate to get a woman, they sign the contract and become slaves. Canada is recently picked as the best country in the world to be a woman. Yeah. It's a feminized country. That's scary. They forgot to mention that any country where it is the best place to be a woman is probably the worst place in the world to be a man. Funny how they never write articles about the best countries in the world to be a man. Only the best place to be a woman. I am now convinced that if Afghanistan is the worst country in the world to be a woman, Canada has to be the worst country in the world to be a man. The natives that were living here for thousands of years before Canada was discovered hate the white people and always have and will. They hate all the other people from all over the world that decided to live here also. Just like in the USA, the British and French that came here 500 years ago commanded the native population with war and disease, and said tough luck if you don't like it. Just like in the USA, the natives here live in poverty on reservations. They have a much lower standard of living than others and have low life expectancies, high unemployment, high AIDS rate, high crime rate, high suicide rate, high drug and alcohol rate, and just about every other basic statistic you can think of. If you were to go to a native reservation in Canada, you would think that you have just gone to a third world country. Wow. The native reservations are abysmal from tourist brochures and travel guides. To make up for killing most of them and running the lifestyle, culture, land, and history, the Canadian government gives the natives tax-free status and pretty much anything else for free. They also always get in it crime sentences compared to others. This will never change. The natives will never like the whites or other immigrants, and the immigrants will never get along with the natives. I don't hate the Indians. I mean, I don't want to do anything bad. The French people will never get along with the English or other people, and vice versa. The largest province in Canada, Quebec, is mostly French speaking, and every 20 years or so they threaten to separate from Canada and become a country called Quebec, not a province. Every time Canada votes on if Quebec should separate or not, the separatists always lose, and Canada stay together until another vote comes along some years later. This will never change. They will never get along. For hundreds of years, England and France were bitter enemies in Europe, and this continues to show in Canada, where they have political and language battles. Canada has French and English as official languages, so everything has to be in both. It's especially bad in Quebec, where they actually have a language police that goes around making sure that everything is in French first and then English. If you have an English-only sign, you'll face heavy fines and punishment. To realize how extreme the language police get, a few years ago, the Quebec government refused to pay for a disabled Quebec woman's assistance dog because the dog only understood commands in English and not French. No, that's bad. Canada is always trying to keep American culture out. An impossible feat when the USA is your best friend and next door neighbor. Canada is trying to establish its own culture and not have too much of an influence from the USA. This will never succeed. The USA is simply too strong and too close. Canada is always coming up with silly rules to keep American culture out, and Canadians are always trying to find new and creative ways to convert these laws. If you are an American and are used to things you can easily get things you can easily get here, you will go crazy here. Most things American are blocked or don't work here. Your satellite system is illegal here. Your video or audio streaming websites won't work unless you have a US IP address. Most websites you bought from in the USA won't ship to Canada. Even the Super Bowl commercials are blocked. TV and radio has a 35% Canadian content rule. So for every 100 television shows and songs on the radio, 35 had to be Canadian. A thriving underground market of all ways to bypass all these laws exist. Most Canadians do not do a lot of shopping in the US and have P.O. box addresses near the border to have shipments sent to and then pick up there. There is really no culture. Canada is simply a British Empire manufactured kill and conquer country that anyone from anywhere in the world can come to and live in and say I am Canadian. Multiculturalism is simply a polite word for people from anywhere in the world living together, but not really caring about any culture other than their own. Most nationalists have stick to their own countrymen and avoid others. About the only thing that will bring people together is a hockey game. Every race and nationality usually cheers when Canada always beat the USA at men's and women's hockey, even though all the players are white. That's about the extent of patriotism here, though, because the same people who were cheering Go Canada will drive across the border the next day to save $20 on a TV in the USA. This business of keeping American culture out of Canada is nonsense. Neither country has any real culture. Compared to Europe or Asia, which has thousands of years of culture and history, Canada has pretty much nothing. 100 years is considered old here. The native culture that existed here before the white people came was wiped out long ago, and the shattered remains live in a squalor on reservations. Most Canadians have low standards when it comes to their appearance, possessions, and women. You don't realize this until you go abroad, where most Canadians look and act absurd in foreign settings. I remember when I was living in Europe and met other Canadians, I was usually disappointed or sometimes horrified by their behavior or appearance. This is simply not a priority to look good or have nice looking things. Standards of beauty are low since people would rather have cheap things than nice looking things. Most houses are big and ugly and filled with possessions that they don't need, but bought because the bank give them a huge line of credit. When the English and French pioneers first settled here a few hundred years ago, the top priority was to stay warm, have food and shelter. If you don't, you will freeze to death by October. This is still relevant in the attitudes of people. Yes, you have all the same modern comforts you have in the USA, but staying warm, dry, and fed is the main priority. Due to this, other things rarely matter. Okay. Most people own a huge amount of money and think this is completely normal. The government is to blame because they regulate the banks and allow people with pathetic jobs to get impossible mortgages and lines of credit. But those people use to buy things that they don't need with the money they don't have. Although the banking system here is very secure and highly regulated, it is inherently fraudulent and one day will get a wake up call. Most people here owe 50% more than what they have. So if every $1 they have to owe $1.50, having huge household debt is completely normal here and expected. People will be shocked if you tell them you owe no money. Living payday to payday is the norm here, and if you don't, people won't like you because you are richer than them, and they will look down on you for being that way. Psh, that's their problem. Screw them. If you are a rich guy, other people will be jealous of you and won't like you. And the gold digging women will like you, but only for your money. So being rich here doesn't make it any better. It doesn't get you better women, whatever or social environment. If they're jealous of me, I really don't care. And the gold digging women, that they can go jump off a cliff for all I care. Being different here is anyway, even positive, is looking down upon, and you seem as elitist, and most people will want nothing to do with you. Screw them. This is the story of my life here. Even now, I'm seen as a freak, although I'm sure many men are jealous of me because of me, but refuse to admit it. I owe no money, paid off my mortgage in 8 years, and now don't have a job. All this is seen as very strange. I used to drink a bit, but now I'm completely sober. This is why I don't socialize here, because the subject of why I don't drink will always come up and annoy me. I have never smoked or used drugs, including marijuana. Smoking marijuana here is completely normal, and if you say you have never done it, most will be quite surprised. I don't watch sports or TV, rarely watch movies, and don't go to live sporting events. I only date foreign women. I speak 3 languages and have been to 33 countries and only date Dutch. I also won't marry and don't have any interest in kids, and I have golf, wrestling, UFC, and NASCAR. If you add all these things up that I don't do and tell them to the average Canadian, they would be shocked and would think of me a freak and won't have nothing to do with me simply because I am different than them, even if it is more positive. Screw them. I don't care. If they don't have anything to do with me because of what I like, screw them. Well, that's their problem, not yours. Screw them. Dating here is a very frustrating and depressing experience. I am picky and only date non-white girls, although I prefer Asians. I don't want them to smoke, do drugs, have tattoos, and I prefer non-drinkers. I want them to be slim, younger than me, and feminine. That's good. In Asia, of course, I won't have millions of girls that fit the bill and will chase me. That's why I have over 6,500 messages on DIA. But here in Canada, of course, I'm seen again as a freak that can't handle a strong woman. I really only use online dating here, where I get where I get nowhere. Most messages go unread, and the section women are is awful. They all have impossible expectations and are absurdly picky. The few local girls I met here online were epic disasters. Most girls that show interest in me here online are horrifying. They are usually overweight 40 something divorced mothers with tattoos. Yuck. If I wanted to, I probably won't get lots of dates with women, but they would all be ones I have no interest in. I don't just hit on random girls because I figure they will do all the things I don't want. I would rather look at porn that have one of the local girls. I had luck with Japanese foreign exchange students, as I wrote about in another post. But after my trip to the Philippines, I realized that nothing will ever compare to that. So that's where I am. That's where I'm headed. SAAP. Living in a big imprisonal and cold Canadian cities is depressing though, but the small towns are even worse. I once spent a year at abroad. I once spent a year at boarding school in the late 1980s in a town of 5,000 people on the outskirts of a town of 80,000 people. 2 hours north 2 hours north of Toronto. The place was so depressing I still have nightmares about it in the school. The place was simply so backwards and pretty and petty it was frustrating. The whole life centered around the hockey ring and a team made up of a local teenage hooligan whose only accomplishments was being able to play hockey. The local girls were simply appalling, awful small town brain dead bitchy hoes whose life consists of being groupies to the hockey players in the hope of getting pregnant by one of them so they could be set for life, and the chance that one of the guys made it to the pro hockey leagues. It doesn't really matter where it is in Canada. A small town here is like going back in time. The attitudes of people, the lifestyle, the small-minded redneck, blue-collar way of living and thinking is to me hell on earth. In the long, cold, desperate winters, awful girls' obsession with hockey, and the negative Anglo-Saxon influence, and you have a true hell on earth. The English and the French were the first Europeans to settle here, and due to this, the Anglo-Saxon influence is the basis for the people behavior here. And this means that no matter where in the world immigrants come from to settle in Canada, they will eventually end up behaving the same idiotic way as the local white people. Even if they don't, their kids will. It is totally normal here for kids from any background or nationality to behave exactly as all the local white kids do. So even though the parents might try to raise their kids in a traditional way, they were raised in their home country. The influence of white Anglo-Saxon cultures is simply overpowering, and one of the kids are in school or watch local TV They are ruined for life. This is why you see this is why you will see Chinese, Indian, and even Filipino kids raised here talking, behaving, and doing exactly the same things as all the local dumbass white kids, which is very sad. Okay, sounds like Canada's pretty messed up. Um, yeah, I remember going there. I went to Victoria on Vancouver Island, and yeah, I know, yeah, I noticed. I know this was something not right. Um, um, I encountered a friendly old lady at a souvenir shop where I bought a bright red Canada hoodie. I was wearing a Beverly Hills Polo Club bright red hoodie, and she told me I look good in red, and some of the bus drivers on the buses I rode, they were kind of robotic, stiff, you know. uh, I don't know. I noticed when I got on this bus, like everybody was like, well, everybody was looking at me and with big smiles on their faces. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. The smiles were real, and I think they were fake. I don't know. This guy's saying that he saying that Canada is not a place you should go. I was thinking about going there again, but I don't know. Reading this, I probably won't go. And also, I watched some YouTube videos from Roosh V and who else? Exposed Toronto. I can't find him. I think he shut his YouTube channel down. And I saw some disturbing videos that I don't want to talk about, which is so messed up and scary. I think I don't want to go to that country. I mean, I mean, anyway, it's an old post from Will N. Dorn. Spell his last name Dowd. Dowd. He posted on December the 17th of 2012, so that's pretty old. Yeah. so I just want to read this out and share this with you. All right. All right. Thank you for watching.